G'day, lovely to be here in a somewhat green crop, but I am a nutrition agronomist myself with Hybrid Ag based around Wangaratta and southern New South Wales, covering a lot of Victoria. We specialise in all sorts of nutrition, custom blended fertilisers, foliar, and try to do agronomy a little bit differently. But I also am a farmer on the weekends, so always something ag going on. You don't usually get a summer crop in Victoria when it doesn't rain. However, this was the feedlot paddock last year, so we had a yeoman's plough come in and rip down to about 400 mil just to open that hard pan and access water down below, a bit of moisture. And it also reduces your evaporation on the topsoil because you'll be able to dig down and the soil's cooler underneath and the pores are broken, so you get less evaporation is sort of the trick. So that's preparing the ground properly. And then we use the carbon-based fertiliser here as well, called Pearl Array. So it's a blend of worm castings, a little bit of ammonium sulphate for plant stress, particularly that sulphur, and just a bit of MAP. So that's really all we've done at this stage, and that's how summer cropping works, I guess. Other things you can do include foliar applied potassium. Potassium's less soluble, particularly when you have no water to solubilise it. So if you put that through the leaf, the plant is able to carry on doing what it needs to do, even though the moisture's not there as much as it should be. In the season, we had a late autumn break, and so the trick is, do you dry sow early and see what happens, or chase moisture after an early rainfall? The thing is, it's often better if you dry sow, provided you've done the preparation and you've got a plan in place. So for example, just down the road we put also multi-species in, however it was forage brassica for the winter. It was dry sown before the Anzac Day rains. Because it was dry sown, we didn't have to disturb the soil again and lose that moisture. You can lose up to 14 mils of rain at that stage out of the soil when you go and disturb it with a seeder or a cultivator to get that ground ready. So sowing early, dry sowing, and for example now with the summer crop, it's best to wait until you've got a little bit of soil moisture because you mightn't get any at all. So provided you can get this up and going, you should be relatively safe, particularly with things like sorghum and sunflower. The others look a bit fancy, but they may or may not do something, I guess. So that's one way of looking at it, just picking the season and being prepared rather than ad hoc. Sowing as early as you can. Obviously you can't do that when you don't have moisture, but dry sowing is one that a lot of farmers will do. So comes a certain time around Anzac Day, they're putting their crops in regardless whether there's moisture there or not, and that means that as soon as you do get the rain, you're not then running around like a headless chook trying to get your crops in, and so sometimes it's worth wearing out a little bit of steel just to get the crop in on time. The other thing is pumping it up early with a bit of granule, provided you can have rainfall, just to get that biomass, and finishing it off with foliars often. Things like molybdenum, boron, zinc and copper are quite deficient in this area, but they can improve nitrogen synthesis quite beneficially, so that you're not using as much urea, you're just making more use of what you apply, and that can protect yield potential in a dry year. And particularly things again like potassium we mentioned will help during grain fill when there's not a lot of soil moisture to solubilise those nutrients that the plant would otherwise be needing. So. Traits to prioritise in dry seasons. If we're talking winter cropping, it's making use of short season wheats, so rather than a winter wheat which requires vernalisation to then go reproductive, which means it needs a certain exposure to the cold to then transfer reproductive rather than vegetative. So if you choose a spring wheat instead, which most growers will do on a short season, and that did happen just last year, a lot of rearrangement of seed coming out of the silos and suppliers running out of different things. So that means it'll grow in a shorter window, but still optimise yield potential. You just will sacrifice a bit of grazing and potentially some yield early on. Urea is one of the most talked about inputs in broadacre cropping and pasture systems. It works really well to promote biomass, and it does this through osmosis. So you'll put urea out, it's solubilized in the soil, the roots take it up, and urea is effectively a salt. So as it takes on that salt, the plants get thirsty and they take on more water, and that makes their leaves swell. You get swollen leaves, you have bigger leaves to catch the sunlight, and that's really important for maximising your sugar and then further biomass growth. However, there's times where you can put too much reliance on urea, and we should use other nitrogen sources as well, things like ammonium sulfate, which provide a balanced form of nitrogen and also sulfur, and that sulfur is important to transfer nitrogen into complete plant protein. So if we use too much urea at once, the plant gets a bellyache, it has lots of free nitrates floating around in the sap, and that's where we get insect pressure. So those small insects will come in and suck the sap, and we go, oh bugger, we're going to have to spray. But it's often an imbalance of mineral nutrition within that plant. So if we can utilise both those sources of nitrogen at the right times, you're going to have a much healthier plant. And also ammonium sulfate will help solubilise some other minerals in the soil in comparison where urea won't do that. So, and then when it comes to end budgeting and nitrogen application, it's often early, get that biomass at tillering time, and don't overcook the crop, because you'll end up with too much biomass and not enough translocation into grain in the end when you run out of moisture. So a lot of that's just around soil moisture, and see what the weatherman says, but it's 50-50 a lot of the time.